The coffee had gone cold. I stared at the cup, half empty, the steam long gone. Funny how something so small could remind me of how much had changed. The apartment was quiet, no TV murmuring in the background, no footsteps padding down the hall. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional sigh of the building's old pipes. I should have been used to the silence by now. The divorce was final 6 months ago. The papers were signed, the furniture divided, the last awkward goodbye said in the courthouse parking lot. But it wasn't the divorce that lingered. It was the look on Diane's face the last time we spoke. Not anger, not sadness, but something worse. Fear. The divorce didn't break her, I thought, running a thumb along the rim of the mug. It was watching me become someone else that did. And then, last night, she called. My phone had buzzed on the nightstand, her name flashing on the screen like a ghost. I hadn't heard her voice in months. When I answered, there was a pause, just long enough for me to wonder if it was a mistake, before she said, "I need to talk to you." I sat up, the sheets rustling in the dark. Now? Number tomorrow. Somewhere neutral. I could hear the tightness in her voice, the same controlled tone she used when she was trying not to cry. "Okay," I said. "Where?" She hesitated. "That diner, the one we used to go to after fights." I almost laughed. The irony wasn't lost on me. That place had been our truce ground for 20 years, the cracked vinyl booths, the weak coffee, the waitress who always remembered our orders. Now, it would be the setting for whatever came next. "Fine," I said. "Noon." She hung up without another word. Now, sitting here in the morning light, I couldn't shake the weight of those words. I glanced at the clock. 10:37, still over an hour before I had to leave. I got up and walked to the window. The city was awake below, people moving in their usual rhythms, oblivious. A couple walked hand in hand down the sidewalk, laughing about something. A delivery guy balanced a stack of boxes on his bike. Life just kept going, even when yours had stalled. I thought about the man I'd been when Diane and I first met. Eager, accommodating, always smoothing things over. And then the man I became later, restless, distant, finally unwilling to keep pretending. She hadn't left because I was worse. She left because I was different. And now she wanted to talk. I poured the cold coffee down the sink and reached for my keys. Whatever this was, I'd face it as the man I was now, not the one she remembered. The diner smelled the same. Grease, coffee, and that faint lemon-scented cleaner they used to wipe down the tables. I slid into the same booth we always used to take, the one in the back corner where the vinyl was split just enough to show a little yellowed foam underneath. Waiting for Diane, I couldn't help but remember the last time we'd sat here. It was after one of those fights that wasn't really a fight, just that heavy silence where we both knew something was broken, but neither of us knew how to say it. Back then, I'd stir sugar into my coffee until it was too sweet, just to have something to do with my hands. She'd tear napkins into little strips while we waited for our food. That was the thing about the end. It wasn't dramatic. No slammed doors, no thrown dishes. Just two people slowly realizing they'd become strangers who shared a bed. The bell above the door jingled, and there she was. Diane had cut her hair shorter since I'd last seen her, the gray more pronounced at her temples. She was wearing that navy peacoat I'd bought her 3 birthdays ago. "Hey," she said, sliding into the booth. "Hey." A waitress, not the one who used to know us, dropped 2 menus on the table. Diane didn't open hers. "You look good," she said finally. I almost laughed. That was the script, wasn't it? Exes pretending they weren't measuring each other's changes like detectives at a crime scene. "You too," I said. Then, because the silence was too loud, "How's work?" She shrugged. "Same. You?" "Same." We'd been married 22 years, and now we were reduced to this. Polite strangers making small talk over coffee. The waitress came back. Diane ordered tea, no lemon. I got coffee, black now instead of the sugary mess I used to drink. She noticed. I saw her eyes flicker to my cup when it arrived. "You really have changed," she said quietly. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. People do. Not always like this. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past. Somewhere in the kitchen, a fryer hissed. I remembered how it used to be, coming home to find her reading in her favorite chair, the way she'd hum off key while making dinner, the comfortable rhythm of two people moving through life together without really seeing each other anymore. Then one day I woke up and realized I didn't know who I was outside of that rhythm, and by the time I started figuring it out, she was already mourning the man she thought I'd always be. Diane stirred her tea, the spoon clinking against the porcelain. "So," she said, "I guess we should talk about why I called." The day it happened wasn't dramatic. No lightning strike, no midnight revelation, just an ordinary Tuesday that somehow became the day I couldn't pretend anymore. I was shaving when I noticed it, the way my hands shook as I dragged the razor down my cheek, not from nerves or age, but from something deeper, something that had been building for years. The face in the mirror wasn't mine anymore, or rather it was exactly mine, and that was the problem. "Mark," Diane called from the bedroom, "you're going to be late." I rinsed the razor, watching pink-tinged water swirl down the drain. "Yeah," I called back. But I didn't move. That's when it hit me with terrifying clarity. I was living someone else's life. The job I'd stayed at for 15 years because it paid the bills. The golf games with clients I secretly hated. The way I automatically said, "Sure, honey," to every weekend plan without checking if I actually wanted to go. I splashed cold water on my face. The droplets clung to skin that suddenly felt too tight. At breakfast, Diane slid my coffee across the counter. 2 sugars, just how I'd always taken it. Except I hadn't liked it that sweet in years. I drank it anyway. "You okay?" she asked, frowning at my untouched toast. "Fine," I lied. That afternoon, I left work early. Not for any reason, just because I could. I drove to the state park we used to visit when we were dating, before mortgages and retirement accounts. The leaves were just starting to turn, that first hint of autumn in the air. I sat on a picnic table, breathing in the crisp air, and realized with sudden, painful clarity, I didn't know when I'd stopped being me. Somewhere between promotions and anniversaries and keeping the peace, I'd disappeared. My phone buzzed. "Diane." "Dinner at 7? I stared at the message, then typed the first honest response in years. "Need some time. I'll be home late." The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, okay. That night, I signed up for a counseling session. The next morning, I went for a run before work. Small things, insignificant to anyone but me. But that's how revolutions start, not with explosions, but with one quiet decision after another. The changes came slowly at first. Early morning runs that meant I wasn't there to make coffee. Therapy sessions that cut into our usual Thursday takeout nights. Diane noticed, of course. She always noticed. "You're different," she said one evening, watching me from the kitchen doorway as I stretched after a run. I wiped sweat from my forehead. "Just trying to take better care of myself." Her arms crossed. "Since when?" The question hung there, sharp as a blade. Since when did I prioritize myself? Since when did I stop asking permission to exist? I shrugged. "Since now." That's when the real shift happened. Not in me, in her. The more I changed, the quieter she became. She stopped leaving her romance novels on my side of the bed, started going to bed before me, our home filled with a new kind of silence, one that had weight to it. Then came the night I canceled our annual summer trip to her parents' lake house. "You're serious?" she asked, her voice tight. "I need this time for myself," I said. She laughed, a bitter, unfamiliar sound. "That's all you ever say now. Yourself." The fight that followed wasn't explosive. It was worse, methodical, precise. 20 years of unspoken rules laid bare. "You used to need me," she accused, clutching her wine glass like a lifeline. "I still do," I said. "Just differently." "That's bullshit." Her voice cracked. "You don't even look at me the same way anymore." She was right. I didn't. Because I was finally looking at myself, really looking, for the first time in decades. Later, in bed, she turned her back to me. "Who are you?" she whispered into the dark. I stared at the ceiling. "I don't know yet." The truth was terrifying for both of us. She'd fallen in love with a man who didn't exist anymore, and I was just beginning to meet the man I might become. In the morning, she left for work without waking me. My running shoes sat by the door, waiting. I laced them up, tied them tight, and stepped out into the dawn. Each stride felt like both an escape and a return. The paperwork arrived on a Tuesday. Plain manila envelope, crisp legal documents inside. We'd agreed on everything, the house, the savings, even who got which books from our shared collection. No fights over furniture, no courtroom drama. Just two people who'd loved each other once, signing away their future with ballpoint pens at a laminate table. Our lawyer, a tired-eyed woman who'd clearly seen this dance before, slid the papers across to us. Initial here, and sign at the bottom. The pen felt heavy in my hand. I glanced at Diane. She was wearing that navy blouse I'd always liked, the one that brought out the blue in her eyes. Her signature was already on the page, neat, decisive, the same way she'd signed Christmas cards and permission slips for 20 years. I signed. The scratch of the pen was deafening in the quiet office. Outside afterward, we stood awkwardly by our separate cars. The September sun was warm on my neck. A leaf skittered across the parking lot between us. "Well," she said, adjusting her purse strap. "Yeah." I jammed my hands in my pockets. "You okay?" She gave me that tight smile I'd come to know so well these past months. "I will be. You?" "Same." The lie came easily. We were both so good at this now. We hugged, quick, perfunctory, and I caught a whiff of her shampoo, the same brand she'd used since the 90s. Some things never changed, even when everything else did. As I drove away, I expected to feel something: grief, relief, anger. Instead, there was just a strange lightness, like I'd been carrying a weight for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand straight. That night, in my new apartment, I opened a beer and sat on the floor because I hadn't bought furniture yet. The silence was different here, not tense like in our house those last months, but open. Possibility hung in the air like dust motes in the evening light. I thought about calling someone, my brother, an old friend, but didn't. Some moments you need to sit with alone. The beer grew warm in my hand. Somewhere downstairs, a neighbor laughed. Life went on, so would I, just differently now. The first Christmas alone was harder than I expected. I spent it at my brother's house, surrounded by nieces and nephews who didn't understand why Uncle Mark didn't have a wife anymore. The kids raced around the living room, hyped up on sugar cookies and excitement, while I nursed a whiskey and tried not to stare at my phone. Diane always loved Christmas. She'd start playing carols the day after Thanksgiving, bake enough cookies to feed the neighborhood, and insist we watch It's a Wonderful Life every Christmas Eve, even though I pretended to groan about it. Now, sitting in my brother's overstuffed armchair, I wondered what she was doing. Was she at her sister's place in Florida, alone in our old house with a glass of wine? Had she started new traditions, or was she clinging to the old ones just without me? "Hey," my brother Paul dropped onto the couch beside me. "You good?" "Yeah," I lied. "Just tired." He gave me that look, the one that said he knew I was full of shit but wouldn't push. "Kids are about to open presents. You in?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, I'm in." Later, after the wrapping paper had been torn to shreds and the kids had collapsed into a sugar coma in front of the TV, I stepped outside onto the back porch. The air was cold and sharp, the kind that made your lungs ache in the best way. I pulled out my phone before I could stop myself. No messages. Not that I expected any. Maybe I was selfish, I thought, watching my breath fog in the air. Maybe growth always is. That was the bitter truth, wasn't it? I hadn't set out to hurt her. I just woke up one day and realized I couldn't keep living half asleep. But in choosing myself, I'd left her behind, and now here we were, two separate lives where there used to be one. The sliding door opened behind me. Paul stepped out, holding 2 fresh whiskeys. "Figured you could use this," he said, handing me one. I took it. "Thanks." We stood in silence for a while, listening to the distant laughter from inside. You ever wonder if you made the right choice? I asked finally. Paul sighed, swirling his drink. Every damn day, brother. About everything. I chuckled, despite myself. Yeah, me too. The whiskey burned going down, but it warmed me from the inside out. Maybe that was all I could ask for right now. Small comforts, quiet moments, the space to figure out who I was without her. I tipped my glass toward the starless sky in a silent toast. To Diane, to the past, to whatever came next. Then I went back inside where the light and the noise and the life waited. Spring came gently that year. I was planting tomatoes on my tiny balcony when my phone buzzed in my pocket. Diane's name flashed on the screen. Not a call this time, but a text. A photo of our old dog Max, who'd stayed with her. He was sprawled in a patch of sunlight, his gray muzzle resting on his paws. Thought you'd want to see him, her message read. He still sleeps on your side of the bed. I wiped dirt from my hands and smiled. It was the first time hearing from her had hurt less. I typed back, "Tell the old man I miss him," then added, after a pause, "How are you?" 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Then, good. Really good, actually. Something loosened in my chest. That afternoon, I met Sarah for coffee, the woman from my book club who'd been asking me out for months. We sat at an outdoor table, the sun warm on our faces as we talked about terrible poetry and her daughter's soccer games. It was easy, uncomplicated. For the first time in years, I wasn't measuring myself against someone else's expectations. Later, walking home through the park, I passed a couple arguing quietly on a bench. The woman was crying. The man stared at his hands. I recognized that posture, the weight of a marriage buckling under things unsaid. A year ago, that had been me. Now I was just a man with tomato plants and a book club and a phone that buzzed occasionally with updates about an old dog. My apartment smelled like soil and sunshine when I stepped inside. The tomatoes needed watering. There was a book on my nightstand I'd been meaning to finish. Small, ordinary things that belonged only to me. I poured myself a glass of water and stood at the window, watching the sunset paint the buildings gold. Diane was happy. I was happy. Not the explosive, all-consuming happiness of new love, but the quiet kind. The kind that comes when you stop pretending. Sometimes love doesn't die with a scream. Sometimes it's the silence when you realize you're no longer the person they're afraid to lose. I watered the tomatoes. The earth drank deeply. Tomorrow would be another day.